Hi and welcome to another episode of the Leadership Enigma. Now, one of the things that we're always trying to do on the show is to find people who have got extraordinary backgrounds, extraordinary experiences. The Leadership Enigma is all about trying to investigate the mindset, the behaviors for all of us in relation to how we are individual and collective leaders. And people with extraordinary backgrounds have got extraordinary insight in relation to the importance of exactly that. And I've got Stephen Malone, who is going to come on the show. Now, I have to read this carefully because you will be super impressed and bemused almost, Anthony, in relation to this background. Former fifth-generation paratrooper, bodyguard, elite operator, former CIA agent, author of 5 books. I've only written one, by the way, Anthony, but author of 5 books, and had the experience of being a hostage for 190 days with the Taliban. Yep, you heard me right. This could be an extraordinary episode. Come back to me just after this.
You're listening to The Leadership Enigma, powered by Transform Performance International, a podcast for the insatiably curious to explore the power of human-centered leadership to create real momentum for positive and sustainable change. Whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, or corporate executive, each week we speak to global experts, academics, rising stars, ambitious upstarts, and disruptors as we discover that success leaves clues. Now, here's your host, Adam Pacifico.
So welcome back, and that was an incredible introduction, wasn't it, in relation to Anthony. Anthony, welcome to the Leadership Enigma.
Adam, thank you for having me on your show.
It's an absolute pleasure. Anthony, this is one of those episodes where I don't actually know where to start. I really don't. I haven't done your background justice at all, forgive me, but you tell me, how would you describe yourself now to the listeners with that background?
I actually think I'm just like Joe Bloggs on the street. I'm like I like to be referred to as the grey man. I'm generally behind the camera, not in front of it, up until a few years ago. A little bit of me, my background isn't anything particularly special. I grew up in the northeast of England, come from a very close, loving family. Education was quite average. I joined the parachute regiment when I was 17. I was served in 4 para, then I went into 3 para, the regulars. I served operational tour in Northern Ireland. I was fortunate enough to be able to do tours in Kenya, Cyprus, and Germany. I then came out of Her Majesty's Forces, and I became a SWAT instructor, Special Weapons and Tactics, in South Africa and across Africa. I then decided to spend time in Cyprus and Lebanon, where I met some very interesting individuals. They happened to be working with the US military. So then I became a combat photographer during the Iraq War with 101st Airborne Division in Iraq, where I met David Petraeus, who is obviously now General David Petraeus, former director of the Central Intelligence Agency. I then met very senior members of the FBI, Drug Enforcement Agency, and pretty much every agency on the planet at that time. Started doing some very low-key work for them that progressed, and I ended up being an actual agent for the Central Intelligence Agency in Iraq and Afghanistan. So that's basically a condensed version of it.
I'm chuckling slightly because, James, let me just check with you. That's not quite a run-of-the-mill background, is it? When you say a man off the street, Anthony, it's an extraordinary background. It really is. And can I go, this is a phrase I use a lot, but can I go backwards to go forwards? You decided to join the parachute regiment when you were 17. What prompted that? That's an early age. You know, I've got a 16-year-old son. Can't really imagine him going into such a regime. But what was behind that decision?
It was kind of already made for me, for want of a better word, because I'm a 5th generation soldier, not 5th generation parachute regiment, because the regiment isn't that old.
Right.
But I'm a 5th generation soldier. It goes back to my great granddad, my father, my uncles,
amazing,
my cousins. all of us have always served. My uncle also served in the parachute regiment as well, and I was that impressed by everything that he had done and achieved. I thought I would like to have a shot at that. I did. I ended up doing P Company twice, once in 4 power, once in 3 power, passed it on each occasion, ended up getting me being awarded my British parachute wings and my French parachute wings as well. And from a very early age, my mindset was always not if I could do something, it was that's what I want to do, go out there and achieve it. So I've always had a very positive, upbeat mindset, even from a very early age. Now, I wasn't being smart by saying that, because a lot of people who apply for the parachute regiment do not get in for a variety of reasons. To me, failure was not an option. I wasn't going to let my family down. So it was literally a couple of hundred of us actually started the training. I think about 12 of us, of the originals, if my memory serves me right, actually passed out. And we joined battalion. So the odds of people passing, it is still one of the hardest, grueling physical challenges that I've ever done. But it was great because the mindset, I love being in the military. I had grown up with my father being in the military on army bases, and it was actually my granddad who taught me to shoot as well.
So you've always had role models in the family, Anthony, in relation to being in the military.
Always had role models. My Sunday afternoons were actually spent when I was very young, when I was a kid, in front of the telly with my granddad and my dad, watching World War II war films. So it wasn't a big surprise. I thought I'd join the military.
I love the fact you've said you're just a lad from the northeast. In fact, I think we've got a photo we can put up on the screens, can't we, James? And I think this is a great photo, if you can see that as well, of you with the iconic red beret on. Can you see that? I don't know whether you can see that yet.
Yeah, I can see me wearing a maroon beret of the parachute regiment and my green 3-power tie as well.
Yep, I think we can see that. Can we see that, James, on the screen? Which is absolutely great. And I think there's another photo as well, which is probably you in more, we might describe, formal dress. If you go to the next photo as well, that's Rogue Warrior. That's for later on, isn't it? But there's definitely, there's loads of photos we're going through here at the moment. There's one of you lined up with other paras in a more formal way. But we'll come on to these photos a little later anyway, because I'll get your explanation of them. And let me just come back a little bit. In relation to, as you say, you are a 5th generation military lad from the northeast. But when you left the military, you went back into private security work, and you were an embedded combat. Why did you keep going back to almost live theatre, or going back to that environment? What prompted you to keep wanting to serve in some way in incredibly hostile and dangerous environments?
I think, a lot of people call it hostile and dangerous. Yes, it is. Any combat zone is hostile. It doesn't matter whereabouts in the world it is.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel, me personally, I actually feel very at home there. I feel more at home military in the middle of a war zone than what I would walking down a high street. To me, everything to me is familiar. I know how to act. I know how to deal with that. The fact I've survived over 30 years military intelligence, working as an operator and in the military on the ground, that speaks volumes. I was a team leader as well for many, many years.
Okay. And
I'm proud to say that I never lost or serious injury any member of my team, whether it was Syria, Iraq, or Afghanistan. So not many team leaders can actually say that. But I'm proud to say that, and I always believe you're going to ask a guy to do a job, you do it yourself first as well.
Well, and that's amazing in itself, and I'm just a huge admiration for everything that you've done, certainly, and all the military who continue to serve. But you just said something that's really interesting there, Anthony, where you just said you felt almost more at home or more comfortable in the middle of a war zone than walking down the street. Why is that?
Honestly, I don't know. I wish I could answer that.
Right.
I think it's because of my upbringing. Fifth generation, brought up in a military environment,
Yep.
being around like the military or war zone. It's pretty much in my DNA. A lot of that I can't actually explain. Just I do actually feel, and the scary thing is, it doesn't take me a great deal of time, because after 10 years of being retired from operations,
Yep.
quite recently I went back in Afghanistan and I slotted straight in there again.
Well, let's focus on that, actually. Forgive me for interrupting, Andy, because you did, as you say, 10 years after finishing your military service, you slotted straight back into Afghanistan. Was that in relation to Operation Patriot?
Yes. Well, what we decided to do, I actually run a little organization. I am co-founder with my fiance of Patriot, which is a little private organization that helps homeless military veterans and veterans and their families, especially veterans with PTSD in England and across America.
Right.
And like a lot of veterans, when the evacuation started in Afghanistan, and it looked like Afghanistan, the government was going to be toppled very quickly by the Taliban. A lot of veterans out there, and I was one of many veterans who were watching it unfold, and it didn't fit well. We had a lot of friends out there. Then about 2 or 3 months before the official evacuation, my old satellite phone started to go off, which is only there for emergencies.
Right.
And I was getting phone calls from colonels, brigadier generals, senior members of the Afghan government asking me for help. Can I get them and the children out of Afghanistan? Now, I was retired, so I was honest with them and said, I'm not operational anymore. I'm not an operator now. I'm retired.
Yeah.
But the volume of calls I was getting was phenomenal. Now, some of these people I've known for a long time, and I know the children.
Right.
And it didn't fit well with me abandoning people who have stood by us, by our country, Britain, America, and other countries. Some of these guys have been translators for the British Army. These are Afghan nationals, and they were stuck in Afghanistan.
Right.
Now, we had already learned that the Taliban were going to hunt a lot of these people down anyway. We started to help. When I say we, Operation Patriot, we actually got people out from about the 2.5 month point before the evacuation. We could see what was going to happen. When the government advisors were telling the world's press that it's going to take 6 months for Kabul to fall, we said within 5 days, it will be gone. It will fall.
Right.
Everyone thought, nah, impossible. I said, you've got it wrong. And I was right. 3 days after I sent that report in, the Taliban were in the presidential palace in Kabul. And the rest, as they say, is history. But there's still a lot of people out there. There's nearly 200,000 people who are eligible to leave Afghanistan, but they're in hiding at this moment in time. And everyone knows, I know what the press are doing, which is one of the things I get a little bit annoyed about at times. I think the world's press should take a bit more responsibility and start reporting the truth, the facts of what's really going on, not political spin and all that crap. It's not right. The public have got a right to know what really is happening over there. I'm pro Afghanistan and the people, obviously not the Taliban. Okay. Now, when I was over there, it was only going to be a very short period of time.
Yep.
I thought, go in, help a few families, get the translators out, get the children out, which we did through 3 neighboring countries. But the numbers that we came across in Afghanistan was phenomenal. There was hundreds of people now coming forward. And if you think each person has got a family, so that's 100, say an example.
Yeah.
One person isn't just one person. The average family in Afghanistan is between 15 and 20 or more individuals. So suddenly you've got one guy you're getting out, you're getting 20. You want to move 100 people out, the numbers start getting a little bit unusual.
Well, just from a logistics perspective. Anthony, just help me. How many people have you helped exit Afghanistan safely?
To get out in excess of over 400 people and families and vulnerable children. And now we are still working on getting a lot of people out. We offer legal advice. Before I came on this show, I was actually on a conference call with a family, a prominent family, and we're helping relocate them to another country. So there is still a lot of work to be done. We are one of the little organizations, but it's the little veteran organizations who are making a massive difference over there. There's a lot of American veterans, former members of the FBI, Central Intelligence Agency, military intelligence. They're doing some phenomenal work. I understand that Afghanistan's off the front page of the press now. It's all about the Ukraine.
Yep.
But when the Ukraine calms down, and it will, Afghanistan is going to come straight back onto the front pages again, but not in a good way, for want of a better word. I was over there for a 3-month period of time. Then I ended up being taken hostage by the Taliban, and I spent 190 days in an underground Taliban interrogation center in Kabul under the old NDS intelligence headquarters. So that was quite a challenging experience.
That's probably an understatement, without a shadow of a doubt. Let me go backwards, because I want to come back to this 190 days in captivity, because it's not every day that I get to talk to somebody who's been through that experience, Anthony, and has come out with an even stronger purpose. In relation to Operation Patriot, how did that operate alongside what was already going on via the government and the military? How did you operate in that environment where, in certain ways, you're a third-party small entity? How does that work?
Well, yeah, we weren't exactly a third-party small entity. By the time we got into Kabul via Uzbekistan, 12 hours overland into Afghanistan.
Yep.
The footprint, don't forget, there's no embassies there. There was no official evacuation or anything. So we ended up being the eyes and ears of certain official agencies and government departments, because they didn't have a clue what was really going on the ground. So we were obviously feeding information back to make sure friendly governments were aware of the facts of what was going on. I would also like to say that the British FCDO, the Afghan desk,
yep,
they done some incredible work. I know they've had a lot of bad press when the evacuation was going on, but what I saw on the ground, the FCO staff back in London and other countries worked round the clock, and a lot of people would not be alive or be in friendly countries now if it wasn't for the head of the Afghan desk and his team.
It's amazing to hear.
Out there, yeah.
I appreciate that. And am I right in thinking as well, in 2021, Patriot actually was awarded, or was recognised by the Ministry of Defence. Am I right with that, Anthony?
Yeah, we've been awarded the Bronze Award, and while I was actually in Afghanistan, we got awarded the Silver Award of the Armed Forces Covenant for the work that we do across the board, helping veterans. So to be recognised bronze and silver was a big thing as well.
Okay.
When I actually got back into England, because I'm a little bit camera shy for want of a better word, I found out I'd actually also been put forward in the English Veterans Awards for Lifetime Achievement and Inspiration of the Year. So I was a little bit taken back. I am proud to say I was beaten by a World War II veteran who had my vote. He was brilliant.
Right.
So if I'm ever going to get beat by someone, it was going to be him, and I thought he was outstanding.
And this is why I love. People ask me, how do you get how do you keep going with the leadership enigma? Well, this is a good reason for the kinds of conversations that you and I are having now. So let me focus on the fact that you were taken hostage by the Taliban for 190 days with some other nationals as well. How did that come about? Were you a well-known figure in the area because of the work you were doing, and they got fed up with you? What happened?
Yeah, it's a bit of an unusual one. There's nothing really about any of it that makes any sense whatsoever. I wasn't in Afghanistan in a covert way. I was there very overt.
Right.
My real name, British passport. I had entry visas in my passport. So I wasn't doing anything untoward at all. I had held meetings in the week before I was taken hostage in the presidential palace.
Right.
We were seen with the Taliban. I had held meetings with senior members of the Haqqani network in Afghanistan. I met multiple members of them in Kabul. And as far as that was concerned, everything was okay there. They knew why I was there. And they also knew I wasn't doing anything detrimental. I was there to help the vulnerable people.
There's a humanitarian element to it.
Humanitarian element to it, yeah. I was there to protect myself and protect other people,
right.
But we were there to help get people out. There wasn't any hidden agendas there. Now, it was in the Haqqani and the Taliban's interest to get these people out of Afghanistan. Because if they were killed at that time in Afghanistan, it would have made them look very bad.
Okay.
But what nobody realized was the infighting and the power struggle going on within the Taliban. Now, the Taliban isn't a cohesive government. It's an umbrella organization of hundreds of tribal elements within it. And most of them don't get on. An example now, 2 weeks ago, it was reported in Eastern Afghanistan, Taliban have been killing Taliban. Okay, so you can imagine how bad it is internally. Now, the Haqqani network come under the umbrella of the Taliban at the moment. Okay, so everyone who I was speaking to, we didn't have a problem with. But there was an extremist element within the Taliban, more aligned to Al-Qaeda.
Right.
Obviously, found out we were there. Now, when I was taken hostage with another British national, there wasn't any gunfights or anything like that. It was very low key. I was looking at a villa to rent, which was the former British ambassador's residence in Kabul, next to the British Embassy, which is owned by an Afghan. Okay, we were going to rent it. Some Taliban approached us. We had all the right identification to be in that area. So like I said, everything was clean. But a couple of the Taliban were not happy. So they asked us to escort them to NDS headquarters, their intelligence headquarters, to answer some questions. Our answer was yes. Not a problem, thinking this is just a mistake. They'll check our entry visas.
Right.
They'll check with the presidential palace and obviously chambers of commerce. Not a problem there. So we didn't think there was going to be any issues. So it was late afternoon at that point. We got driven literally, I think it was a 5 or 10 minute car ride to the headquarters. Car pulls up, I get out of the front seat. We're not handcuffed to anything at this point. The head of the facility is there to greet me. He shakes my hand. I know all the local customs. At this point, I am dressed as an Afghan as well. I've got the big beard. I've got the Afghan clothing on, so I'm showing respect to them. They're showing respect to me back. We then get escorted into a holding cell, which is the normal procedure.
Okay.
But unbeknown to us, all hell was about to break loose politically, not just politically within the Taliban, politically internationally. And instead of being there for 1 or 2 days, we ended up being there for 190 days.
Wow. And were you kept in the same place for 190 days, or were you moved?
We were kept in the same place. I was moved a couple of times into a different cell in the corridor, and what for the first 2 weeks, the Taliban didn't who were holding me didn't have a clue who I was, my background, or anything. So we thought after a week or 2 weeks we'll get released, handshake, and that's the end of it. We didn't realize the infighting in the Taliban had got really bad internally at this point. We also got a member of the Taliban, quite a young guy from southern Afghanistan, and he hated with a vengeance anything that was from the West, particularly anything that was British, and he really hated anything that was connected to the British Army, because he had a personal grievance with British Marines in Helmand.
Right.
So you can imagine, I'm obviously a veteran.
You're ticking all the wrong boxes, aren't you now, Anthony?
We ticked all the wrong boxes, yeah. And from day one, week one, we just did not get on at all. And I'm not going to pull any punches on this one. He didn't have to, but he tortured the hell out of me multiple occasions, asking me very silly questions. He wanted me to give up the code to my telephone. There wasn't anything really on it, but I waited 4 weeks under torture and interrogation before I gave up my code to my phone, because I knew after the 4-week point, everything would self-delete off the telephone anyway. Most of it, of any interest, would have been deleted after 12 hours, 24 a day a week, maybe 2 weeks max. But I managed to hang in there for a 4-week period of time. And he was making life quite uncomfortable in there.
Well, I think you're probably underestimating as well for me. Forgive me for breaking in there. I always feel any question I ask now, Anthony, is just not going to do justice to the gravity of what you've just described. So let me just get this right in summary, as people are listening to this and probably asking many questions themselves. You're held hostage, you're incarcerated for 190 days, where you simply don't know what is going on. You don't know how vulnerable or safe or not you are. You're tortured. How are you getting through this? Because we talk to leaders all the time who are trying to live and lead through change and disruption. And in some ways, I feel it's almost meaningless compared to this conversation. How do you get through that feeling of helplessness, or even worse, hopelessness? How do you find the strength to get through that, Anthony?
Everyone's got their own way of doing it. One, I'm never hopeless. Two, I'm never helpless, ever. Doesn't matter what situation I'm in.
That's an incredible mindset, though. You're incarcerated, you're being tortured, but you're never helpless and you're never hopeless.
No, because you're in control, as in your mind. It's all about this. It's all about your mindset. Was there times I thought I was going to be dragged upstairs and shot in the back of the head and executed? Hell yes. There was one particular occasion. Another occasion, we nicknamed him Dr. Death, came downstairs, senior member of the Taliban, and he threatened to keep us in there for 40 years or take us upstairs and hang us all. My response to him was, can I order a pizza then? I mean, you've got to break the negative. Did everyone fare well in there? No names have to be mentioned. A couple of the guys did not handle the situation well. But I told the boys when we were in there, how you act now will be remembered. Don't give the bad guys the satisfaction of seeing you cry. Now, in that situation, you've got two options. You either curl up in the corner, cry and die, or you roll up your sleeves and you crack on with it. You try and make it as best as you can. Yes, I'm confident, but I'm not an idiot. It was a dark situation to be in. We were kept underground for nearly 23 and a half hours every day. It wasn't a nice place to be. But as soon as your mindset goes in a negative, it's a spiral. You will keep going down. So you've got to stay positive. You've got to stay focused. You've got to stay looking forward at all time, because this will end. I didn't know it was. At the end of the day, they took me upstairs and shot us in the back of the head. That would have been the end of it. So I wouldn't have anything really to complain about anyway, because I would be dead. But I thought, the day will come here when I'm going to walk out of here. I'm going to walk out with my head held high. I've held my own. And in an official briefing by the British Foreign Office, they took great pleasure in telling me when they found out, yes, I'd been tortured, yes, I'd been giving them a hard time, but I'd given my interrogator just a hard time as well. And that gave them, they thought, right, if I'm upbeat and he's holding it together, he's a natural team leader, he's going to be helping everybody else as well. So we tried to keep all together. But in this situation, everyone gets the good and the bad days. I had a couple of bad days. Everyone had bad days in there. But 99.9% of the time, always upbeat, always positive, always looking forward. I believe it's quite easy for someone to make hell out of heaven and heaven out of hell. Very easy. And a lot of people are going through hard times now. Yeah, I went through Afghanistan. But a lot of people now with the economy, with the businesses, the mindset that people have got to look for is just, don't let it get on top of you. If you have a bad day, learn from it. For every negative, you can draw a positive. That's very important, that. And if you stay positive, you'll be amazed. The people around you will take that positivity and they will follow you. So I believe in leading by example as well.
This is one of those occasions, Anthony, where I'm normally full of lots of questions. In some ways, I'm a bit speechless. I'm looking at James as well at the moment. I'm a little speechless almost in relation to where you're getting that strength from, taking into account what you've just described to me. And forgive me, I'm chuckling, aren't I? Because in some ways I'm thinking the pressures and the challenges that we might take for granted on a day-to-day basis just pale into insignificance in comparison. And I know our issues, people's issues are their issues and they're important, and we have to try and overcome them. But I want to ask you this question, if I may, is 190 days, how did it come to an end?
It came to an end through a lot of talking, a lot of negotiation between senior members of the British government, British Foreign Office.
Yep.
Shout out again to the British Afghan desk.
So the government were working in the background for you, were they?
Yeah, they were working in the background. Interesting point. At around the 2-month point, 3-month point, I was called upstairs late at night.
Yep.
And I was, out of all of us in there, I was the one who was given the hardest time. But they called me up as an individual and they actually offered me a deal. And if I had turned against my country and my fellow inmates, one particular, then I would write a statement, I'll be taken to the airport, and that would be the end of it. I'll be flown out. And I believe that offer was 100% genuine because of who the guy was,
right,
who was in front of me, and he was a senior individual. I turned around to him and said, what sort of a person would I be if I betrayed my country and my friends? It ain't going to happen. And he said, we already knew you were going to say that, well, you can't blame us for trying. And I said, I understand why, but I said, you know enough about me and my background. That ain't going to happen. I said, I've lasted 4 weeks under interrogation. I said, and even then, you didn't get anything that was actually worth anything. So I said, chances are, you're not going to get anything out of me. And he acknowledged that. And from that meeting onwards, my treatment actually improved a little bit. But what astounded me was when I was finally released, we were called into a room.
Yep.
And I was given back my passport, my watch, my ring, my wallet, money, cards, and the original letter from the Chambers of Commerce that was signed by the Taliban. And I was the only prisoner to receive all that back. And the gentleman who gave me it back had told me just before this, so you're going to get your watch and everything back as a sign of respect from one soldier to another. I think it's because they actually tried to break me.
Right.
They managed to break my body. Yeah, I ended up with 6 fractured ribs, nerve damage down the right side of my body, concussion, and partly deaf in my right ear now as well, and a lot of different injuries. My teeth at the bottom, I actually shattered one of my teeth because I bit down that hard during one of the interrogations because I didn't want to scream out, didn't want them to give the satisfaction when they had 5 Taliban had pinned me to the actual floor, handcuffed my hands, tied my legs together, pinned down, removed my shoes and socks, and they whipped the bottom of my feet repeatedly. Now with a hardened rubber hose. Now that was pain like I've never felt before. But they pretty much threw everything but the kitchen sink at me. But I think after that, they realised they could break my body, but they're not going to break this, the old mindset.
And I think that's the incredible and extraordinary part of this story. I've got another question for you, Anthony, because I'm assuming at some point you were pushed and pushed and pushed. And in some ways, did you make a conscious decision that actually what you stood for and the values that you had as a former military officer or former military personnel, and also the work that you were doing on a humanitarian basis, that actually you were willing to, in some ways, give up your own life because you didn't know what was going to happen?
Well, there's an interesting part of this. The afternoon before we were released,
yep,
some of the other prisoners were called upstairs. They were told they were going to be released and put in the room next door. I get brought upstairs to speak to Ahmed, who's my interrogator, the guy who tortured me.
Yes.
And instead of starting the conversation off with, Anthony, you know what, had our differences, but you're being released tomorrow. He didn't do that. He went into one of his normal fire and brimstone speeches about how we are evil in Britain and the armed forces are the devil, and started having a go.
Right.
So, not very wisely on this occasion, I stood up and I got nose to nose with my interrogator, and I told him what I thought of him. But the interesting thing was, during this occasion, none of his bodyguards jumped in. Not one of them. I didn't lay a hand on him, but I was right up to his nose. And he couldn't even look me in the eyes. He was looking at the ground. And that was the moment where I thought, I've got you. You've just given me the actual room. Everyone in here now has lost respect because he didn't have to do that. Then obviously I come out of that particular room, and my other British colleague I was with had said, did the interrogator give you the good news that you're leaving tomorrow? And I said, no, he didn't, but I've just given him the good news, so I think I'm going to be staying a while. So that was one of those times there where I thought, well, I might have dropped a bit of a bollock here, but I stood by it, stood by what I said. But I was escorted down by other senior members of the Taliban, and they were more concerned if I was okay, if I was upset about what had just happened. And I said, I'm all right. But I said, maybe I shouldn't have said what I did to the interrogator, but he deserved it. He had to go at our armed forces, at our soldiers, our service personnel, and I'm a very proud military veteran. So I put him in his place, right or wrong. I have no regrets on that as well. But that was the last time I ever saw that interrogator.
And I know you're continuing to do a lot of good work in relation to veterans. And here, I'm now going to ask you a ridiculous question, even as I'm thinking this is ridiculous, because with all of the experiences that you've been through, and I know we've talked still briefly about captivity for 190 days. I know you're doing a lot of speaking. You've written 5 books, so you're sharing your story. You're not hiding it in any way. You're sharing the story, and you're almost using that as your personal power. Those experiences, what have they meant for you, and how can you help people in themselves, their mindset and their behaviors and their leadership? Anthony, here's my ridiculous question. Taking into account all of the experiences that you've had, which are undeniably unique and horrific in part, what are the kind of the top leadership lessons that you've taken away for you that you're now sharing with other people?
I think everyone's got their own experiences, and I think the key is use your experiences, even your negative experiences, use them, learn from them. My original books were not written as commercial books.
Right.
They were written as an aid memoir for military intelligence. That's what it was for.
Okay.
But then when the colonels and that read it, they said, you've got to release it publicly because people can learn a lot from your experiences. I've had a colourful life. There's not much I haven't done, been involved in. But I thought, you know something, people can learn a lot from my experiences. And what I personally find very rewarding is talking or teaching to the younger ones, the younger generation of people who are coming up through the ranks, whether it's within police force, the military, or government circles. And about a month or so, I've done a talk for SERA, which is the British military survival of the services. And I went down, done a talk to people who are going to be working in hostile environments, most probably behind enemy lines. And I was talking to them, and it was great to be able to share the experiences, not just with the students on the course. Some of these guys were quite high-ranking NCOs, right, but with the instructors as well. Because I found there's not many people like me who have actually worked behind enemy lines, been captured by the enemy, survived it in the modern day, and come out of it. So I've still got a lot of experience there, and I'm glad to be able to share with talks. My books are very detailed. They're not really written. I didn't get I was offered a publishing deal and I turned it down because I wanted to write the book myself as I would talk. So it's very matter of fact, very, very detailed to the point of now my third book, my first and third book, in the United Nations are now referred to as the honor-bound report because it's that accurate and there's that much information in it as well.
And then where can people get copies of some of these books, Anthony?
All my books are on Amazon. Right. It's the Honor Bound Trilogy by Anthony Stephen Malone. Put that into the internet, Anthony Stephen Malone. Okay. It'll take you there. I've got websites. I'm on all social media platforms, all over the place. And
so actually, what's the best way for people to contact you as well? Just so let's get that in as well.
If anyone wants to contact me, or if any veterans or any business leaders have got any questions or need advice or anything, I am on Facebook and I am on LinkedIn.
Brilliant.
So there are the two very easy ways to contact me.
I want to go through just some of these photos. Can we see this on the screen? Is that on the main screen, James? So let's just put this on the main screen. I think we've got it behind it. And just talk us through. Now, I appreciate if you're listening to the audio here, please check out the episode on our YouTube channel. And we'll describe the picture. So which picture am I looking at? So I think we'll go for... Can you see these pictures, Anthony?
Yep.
You can do. Them, yeah. So this is this you, Anthony? Rogue Warrior?
Yeah, that is me, 2003, on combat patrol with 101st Airborne Division.
Right.
Obviously, my private weapon there, which anyone who works for me always knows I use that, because it's got it's an Armalite with a 40mm grenade launcher on the slung.
Okay.
So that's always my personal weapon, whether it's either Iraq or Afghanistan.
Gotcha. Okay, let's go on to another photo then, James. You flick it across and we'll see. Right, what's going on here?
This is Afghanistan during the evacuation.
Yep.
This particular picture was taken in eastern Afghanistan in the mountains,
yep,
where I met and had chai tea with the village elder of that area.
Incredible. Okay, let's go to another photo. I mean, a picture paints 1,000 words. It really does. And certainly, positive mindset. We've spoken a little bit about this in the English Veterans Award. Anthony, tell us about this photo.
That was the photo shoot when I came back to England, and I had found out I had been shortlisted in the English Veterans Awards for Lifetime Achievement and Inspiration of the Year.
Wow, amazing. Okay. And I think there's a couple of other photos that we want to just go to as well. I know you do a lot of speeches, don't you? So this must be one of those.
This was actually the talk I did for the SERA course,
right?
For the British services.
Great. And then there's another one as well. There's definitely this is On Abound, the trilogy. There's definitely a picture, isn't there? I know, because at one point you said, "Now, what's going on here, Anthony?"
This is where I had tea and a meal with a senior member of the Taliban, who's also the head of protocol at the presidential palace.
Gotcha. Okay. And then definitely a picture of, you said you were dressed in Taliban or certainly Afghanistan clothing. What's going on here? Oh, here we go. How about this one?
That particular picture was taken in 2010. That was where I spent 3 years undercover, maximum security, Polishaki, working for the Central Intelligence Agency, feeding information back to the British and American intelligence about attacks that the Taliban were trying to launch from inside the prison. They were running it and organizing it. So that 3-year period of time, we were able to stop a lot of IED attacks and other attacks on British, American, and ISAF forces in Afghanistan at that time.
Anthony, I know there are more, there really are, and we could keep going, and in some ways people need to check out the On Abound trilogy and or connect with you to kind of continue the conversation, or indeed invite you to come and visit their leadership teams or organisations so they can hear direct from you in relation to your incredible story. Listen, thank you so much, Anthony, for reaching out and taking the time to come on to the Leadership Enigma and very candidly sharing your story. And I know listeners are going to be frustrated with me, Anthony, because I probably only asked a handful of questions that I should have asked. But in many ways, it's been a real privilege to listen to your story and for you to be part of the show. I hope this has been useful to you.
Adam, thank you for having me on the show. It's been an honour, it's been a privilege, and a message to everybody out there: stay positive, stay focused. It's all about your mindset. You can overcome anything if you want to. Thank you.
And if anyone's going to know that, Anthony, I think you are. So thank you very much for coming onto the show and sharing that. You've been an absolute superstar. Take great care, my friend.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Join us again next week for more tips and strategies on the Leadership Enigma. We'd love to hear your comments on today's show, as well as suggestions for future topics and guests. Get in touch with your host on LinkedIn or visit the dedicated website, www.leadersenigma.com, powered by Transform Performance International, where you can access our exclusive learning, including books, videos, bonus content, assessments, and more. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on all your major podcast platforms. Thanks for listening.